A production of eMedia and South Carolina ETV.
Welcome to Project Discovery, a production of eMedia of the South Carolina Department of Education and South Carolina ETV. Hi, I'm Betty Jamison, and today Project Discovery is at the South Carolina State Museum as we honor South Carolinians who served our country, the famous and the little known, and discover how South Carolina played a significant role in our nation's military history. And we have a student host today, Morgan Adams, who's a sophomore at AC Flora High School. Welcome, Morgan.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to be taking your questions later on in the program by email. Morgan, tell them about that.
I will eagerly be waiting for students to email in questions, and if you want to go ahead and email them in, the email address is projectdiscovery@scetv.org.
Thanks, Morgan. I hope we'll be getting lots of questions. Let's learn more about World War I because we're going to Camp Jackson that was started in 1917.
A group of Columbia businessmen met together one afternoon, raised the money, bought the initial acreage, 10 or 12,000 acres, I can't remember the exact amount, but they bought that and made a gift to the federal government.
There was little time to lose. On June 2nd, 1917, Camp Jackson was established. And just 11 days after the construction contract was signed, the first trainees arrived.
When the Army took it over and began construction in June of 1917, it was like a mining camp all of a sudden. They had to build tram rails out from the city to it and railways because that was the main way to get supplies and men out there. And by the peak of construction, there were 10,000 laborers working to build barracks, mess halls, auditoriums, stables for horses. They even had an airfield there, amongst many other things. And so these things went up very quickly.
If you look at the photographs, and we've got fabulous photographs of all of these places, yeah, they're in World War I uniforms, but some of them look like stockades from, the B cowboy movies I used to watch in the 1940s and 1950s. I mean, you're talking about wooden installations. I mean, mud, tents, nothing permanent.
Hundreds of buildings went up, and 3 months after the start of construction, some 8,000 more draftees came to the camp. Educated and ambitious, a new generation was emerging with the means to create a new way of life.
I think from the outset there was a great deal of hope and anticipation that the war might serve as a platform for advancing civil rights for African Americans in the state.
In South Carolina, the 371st Infantry embodied that hope. But like other attempts to attain equality, this one met with resistance.
The 371st emerges as this kind of interesting experiment of training former agricultural laborers, training former sharecroppers to now engage in military combat. The story is that the 371st was this ragtag assembly of sharecroppers and farmers who were eager to come to Columbia to train, who came tattered, barefoot. And there well may be an element of that, because indeed that picture that emerges, I think, was probably a fair reflection of the poverty of which many of these men came from. Yet at the same time, 371st included a number of very literate, professional men, accomplished people who came as a result of the Selective Service Act. Some were not sort of immediate volunteers. Many of them were called upon to serve and really had no choice in serving.
But it turned out these soldiers quickly adjusted to military life. And that's one thing you keep seeing time and time again, how adaptable, flexible these soldiers were, how well they took to training. And they eventually became supposedly the smartest dressed and drilled unit at Camp Jackson. and they were given accolades by the post commander and the people of Columbia, for this.
And Morgan, thank you for joining us. I know that you had a great experience. You got to meet the Doolittle Raiders, who was certainly famous in World War II.
Yes, I had the opportunity to go to one of their reunions and actually talk to the remaining Doolittle Raiders, who actually flew with Doolittle himself in the raid.
Wow. And what was this for? You produced a film. What did you do that for?
I produced a short film for the National History competition, and it was a lot of fun.
Okay, well, let's take a look at what Morgan did on her great experience with meeting the Doolittle Raiders. A clip from that.
My name is Morgan Adams, and in the spring of 2009, I met 4 heroes of World War II. The Doolittle Raiders held their 67th reunion in Columbia, South Carolina, and I wanted to learn about their important role in history.
If these fellas aren't the definition, the living definition of heroes, then I don't know what is.
One of the greatest stories of American aviation is the story of the Doolittle Raiders.
The raid was conceived as a way to strike back at the Japanese homeland early in World War II in retaliation for Pearl Harbor.
After the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, the United States government asked for volunteers for a dangerous mission. A group of 79 B-25 bomber pilots, led by Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle, flew off the flight deck of the USS Hornet to bomb Japan.
We took off 250 miles farther out than we had planned on because we encountered some Japanese ships out there, fishing vessels. And we knew they had radio equipment and had warned the mainland of Japan that the our 2 carriers and our planes were coming. So we took off 250 miles more. When we headed in towards Japan, we believed that the distance was so far now that we very likely would run out of fuel over the North Sea as we headed in towards China later in the day or later in the evening.
I have tremendous respect for these fellas, because at that moment, all of those crew members knew that they probably weren't going to reach the safe Chinese air bases they intended to fly to on the fuel that they had, because they had to launch early. They launched and went anyway. They did change the course of the war in the Pacific for the United States. So truly the real American heroes of that time, and still to this day.
67 years later, the Doolittle Raiders returned to where they started training for their mission, in Columbia, South Carolina.
Wow, true heroes, the Doolittle Raiders. That was something that Morgan got to meet them and create this video. Morgan, do you have another email from a student?
I do. Jason from Mount Pleasant is wondering, did the Doolittle Raiders have anything to do with the Yorktown and Charleston?
Well, did the Doolittle Raiders have anything to do with the Yorktown? Can you feel that one, Joe? We've got about a minute. Tell us about Camp Jackson, which is Fort Jackson today, and what it means to South Carolina.
Camp Jackson was given to the state, given to the federal government in 1919. It's been in existence the entire time since then. We train about 75,000 soldiers, sailors, airmen a year, 50,000 in basic combat training skills, 10,000 in job skills, whether they're mechanics, finance clerks, or chaplains. We train all of the Army's chaplains, Navy's chaplains, and Air Force's chaplains, and most remarkably, we train 5,000 sailors a year who come to Fort Jackson, learn 3 weeks worth of basic training, are immediately deployed to places like Iraq, Afghanistan, and Djibouti.
Well, and let's talk a little bit about that, because right now we are in the middle of war. We have young men and women defending our country, just like our native sons have done all through the wars, from the Revolutionary War. We have native sons and daughters over in the Middle East. Thank you for watching Project Discovery, and have a great day.